Literaturwissenschaftlerin, sie hat einen PhD, also einen Doktortitel in englischer Literatur. Sie hat gelehrt als Professorin an der Astrid-Universität in Teheran und sie war involviert in die Aufstände nach dem Tod der jungen iranisch-kurdischen Frau Jinanisa Asadi. Amini, Masa Amini. Ihre Studentinnen und Studenten an der Universität haben an diesem Aufstand teilgenommen und es gab eine Petition, die Dr. Behnaz Amani mit unterschrieben hat und daraufhin ist sie festgenommen worden und hat 46 Tage im Gefängnis in Iran verbracht. Das ist heute allerdings weniger das Thema, sondern wir möchten gerne über einen Essay sprechen, den sie geschrieben hat. Ein sehr interessanten Essay mit dem Titel Women's Body under Secondary Colonialization. Wir machen das so, dass Behnaz Amani diesen Essay Stück für Stück liest und wir werden immer in einigen Abschnitten das Gelesene vertiefen, weil der Essay wirklich anspruchsvoll ist und natürlich auch auf Englisch und ich werde sie durch einige Fragen vertiefen und dann wird sie weiterlesen. So, Behnaz, I just told you that we will read your text. I introduced you, we will read your text step by step, and then I will ask some questions to deepen what you wrote, and then we will continue so that we have not a long reading, but really some sort of a conversation on a very interesting but also challenging topic. So, please, we start with your text.
Women's body under secondary colonization. This is Behnaz Amani, one of the political prisoners of Iran's recent revolt, Women, Life, Freedom. I've been in Gachek prison for almost 2 months and have seen things which make me wonder and ponder upon the concept of the female body and capitalism and how the state can be considered as a tourist who is taking pleasure and exploiting our body and colonizing us as its assets. In her anti-colonial article, A Small Place, Jamaica Kincaid notes, secondary colonialism occurs when inhabitants of wealthy, highly developed northern or western countries convert poorer, formerly colonial, usually southern and eastern countries into sites or objects of useful pleasure. Tourism is the most obvious example of such colonization. When I look at it from a different angle, from a woman's angle, who lives under a totalitarian regime, I cannot help myself not to see how the government applies these second colonialism on my body, on the female body. The power elites are those, not necessarily wealthy, inhabitants of totalitarian regimes that are playing, exploiting and controlling our bodies, just like the tourists that Ms. Kincaid talks about who are not welcome at all.
So my first question from this first section, you talk about colonialism, which is also a very actual discussion here in the Western countries, and you look at it from a different angle. So colonialism is basically invading a country and exploiting it, and now you put it on the same level. You transfer this idea to the Iranian regime. Can you just explain a little bit, in your words, how this idea came to you?
Since our childhood, they try to impose on us their rules, which are not in our nature, which is not part of our culture. So when, for instance, they force you to cover your head, to say your prayer, to fast, which you're not familiar to before going to school, it's a challenge. And gradually they tell you that, okay, by age of 9, you become mature enough to perform all the duty of a Muslim woman. And
age of 9.
Age of 9, and you're also allowed to be married. Because in Islam, it has been believed that a girl must married before her puberty, and she must have her first puberty, her first blood, in her husband's house. So if it's not colonization, what is it then?
Go on.
During the 8 years of war between Iran and Iraq, women's body was considered vessels or machines, soldier production machines that neither had feelings and passion for their children, nor had any right to think as such. The praise of necrophilia, in the sense of praising death, was that much powerful that any mother whose child was killed at war was praised and promised paradise, as if there was some contract between the government and God with the subject of women's bodies as production machines to safeguard victory in return for paradise. This was the accumulation of the labor force for the future. State capitalism turns women's bodies into its assets. They become machines to produce surplus human resources that the government can easily let die. That's the point where the government's by politics calculated management of these surplus populations' lives to be nurtured and lives to be killed. The homo sackers, like children of labor, garbage collector, or in my case, rioters, are the ones who can be killed with impunity or let die or left in prison to rot.
You raise a very important point here. I just repeat the sentence. Women's body was considered vessels or machines, soldier production machines that neither had feelings or passion for their children. So soldier production machines, this is something which sounds quite familiar when we look back into our German history. So the Nazis had the same concept of producing many children for making war. I wonder, was this your idea of or your analysis here, or is there a real concept for it in Iran that women are machines for producing warriors?
Not directly, not in an obvious way, but it was encouraged at that time, and you can still see the mothers who are old women now. When you go and talk to them and ask about their loss, they will never ever regret what they've done. I mean, it's like as if they are not allowed. They have accepted this, that this was in their fate to produce children to send to war, and it is not on them to be happy or sad about that, because that was their duty, that was their share to pay to Islam.
What does this make with the psyche of the people?
As far as I remember, since I was a child, you could have smelled death everywhere and no one were happy at all. This is the same even nowadays, because, for instance, my generation, we never had a childhood. It was all about sadness, the news of death, and the war. I remember even when I was in primary school, they were disseminating these small boxes to us to gather money for Bosnia. When there was a war in Bosnia and Herzegovina, they sent us. They asked us to gather money to support the war over there. So the only thing that we are so much close and so much familiar with is death and oppression. Wherever you go in Iran, you will see billboards, huge ones, that say hijab is immunity, not restriction, along with paintings such as a rosebud or a pearl in a shell. Seems to be closed is fundamental. But remaining closed for what? Is it just a cover for my body, for the female body, or is it also a cover for our eyes and minds? Shall we play dumb? Because we are supposed to be good wives of this country, and good wives are obedient. And to be obedient, one must learn not to see, not to hear, not to think. Does it not feel like one of those beautiful islands that are under secondary colonization? For the regime claims they are here to protect us, to support us, to take care of us. Yet, taking care of us in its another meaning, which is getting rid of us, women. as they've proven clearly during these last 2 years by sending us to prison and deleting us from the surface of the streets, companies, universities, and even our homes. Since you are the government's asset, you must be protected. The family foundation in such a totalitarian regime is based on the exploitation of the female body as its asset. Therefore, it should be politically protected as well, and women like me who do not fit into this category are considered threats that must be eliminated.
So I repeat, because this is also a very significant sentence, that the totalitarian regime is based on the exploitation of the female body as an asset. So once again, we know this also from our history, but I would like to point out mention something else before this. Is you write hijab as immunity. So immunity. So immunity against what?
Exactly, that is the question. You know, something which comes to my mind first when I thought about it is that when you're talking to victims of rape, many people around the globe were telling them that it was your fault. If only you wore something more proper, more appropriate, that wouldn't happen to you. But I am here, sitting here in front of you, telling you, the time that I was raped, I was fully covered due to the school that I went, and I had to wear uniform and we had to wear chador. So I had the desired kind of hijab that was imposed on me, yet I was raped. So what kind of immunity is that?
And how women deal with this, because there are certainly many who experienced things like that. Is there a possibility to stick together, to get a lawyer? I mean, even in Western countries, as you said, it is the fault is very often with the women. But what does this make with the women in Iran?
About the rape?
Yeah, and
unfortunately, usually people remain silent. They prefer not to talk about it. I myself have never talked about it until recently. No one know that, not even my mother. But I believe this should change. Again, as we make up half of the population, our bodies are required in the economy, but only as host humans, for still, the higher ranking jobs belong to men, and they are the ones who deserve the higher salary, not us, women. When Miss Kincaid notes, West got nothing and then undervalued labor for generations of the people like me, how can one not sympathize with those colonized people as a colonized woman by a totalitarian regime? Capitalism is linked to Islam here. Accordingly, those women who are definable in the Islamic discourse are valuable assets who are allowed to leave. Women who are machines to produce productive labor force. Women who are not only available for the cheap labor forces in the society at different jobs, but also they are available for free housework. Meanwhile, if required, considered a threat to men's employment. This is the government's discourse to provoke the antagonism between men and women and between women or its assets of the states and other women who are not definable by the state's standards. The destructive effect of patriarchy is the point that dehumanizes a great population of women who serve the system, in the parliament, in prisons, and even in many houses. This is how the state is taking away women's agency.
So I pick up the word defemination. It sounds somehow contradictory, but because on the one hand, the regime makes women a soldier, so some sort of soldier is a producing machine, as you said, for getting soldiers, and on the other hand, they are excluded from all the benefits of males.
Unless they are serving the patriarchal system. For instance, consider Ensiehaz Ali. She is a member of parliament, but you cannot consider her as a woman because whatever decision she is making, whenever she talks, is always in favor of the state. and against women. For instance, she is one of the people who is supporting severely the child marriage.
A second question to this passage: what does this? There's apparently a complete lack of love, and in a certain way, the men are also the victims of this. So, what does this make with the boys and with the young men who are certainly, maybe they are not loved, and because they're becoming the soldiers?
They're in the habit of making this category of you and us. To them, we are the other, the outsider. So what is happening here is the continuation of this familiar me and that unfamiliar other. They children, as far as I saw when I was in prison, the way that they were behaving towards the small children, usually they had 3 to 4 children and all were small at the age of 5 or 7, something like that. And I remember that most of them, because it was in the cold weather, they were having cold and they were sick and no one was taking care of them at home. And they were talking on them on the phone and saying, okay, take care of your little ones and your father will come home in the afternoon. No, I cannot arrive. So I was thinking, what will happen to those children? Unfortunately, the outcome is clear. Their generation is going to reproduce itself as brutal creatures that can easily attack people like us on the streets and kill us without hesitation. I've seen many victims who lost their eye, who lost their hand, and they all were telling that there were no distance at all between the shooter and them. They put the gun on the hand and shot. Isn't it ridiculous that the same women, I mean the Luchan girls case, who were sold to Turkomans and Armenians in 1905 as slaves, and the captivation of Osmanlı's women in the same year that became Iran's daughters, who were used at the constitutional revolution to give the parliament and the government of the time its legitimacy as the country's namus, honor, are now becoming its grand problem. They are continuously telling us that if it were not for us, such a powerful patriarchal government, women in this country would have come to naught, since we are imbeciles and frailty is our name. They held an international congress for women of influence from around the world on January 20th of 2023 to give the impression that they are pro-women in this government. While at the exact moment there were 160 people, 1,600 people, mostly women in prison, only in the first 2 months since the beginning of the revolt, for protesting to gain our very basic human rights. On that account, women like me are surplus to the state's assets and must be removed. In my cellmate's case, since she is no longer considered a valuable asset, yet considered still as capital, her husband told her, "Why would I bail you out of prison? Go back in there and let my house be freed. Instead of going out with your friends, come and think about your 5-year verdict and how can you make the best out of your time in prison. Go back in there and after 5 years we will go abroad, buy your case and apply for asylum." So, she's not his asset, but his capital. But this is only one part of the story. Millions of fathers, brothers and husbands are standing by us, women. When we were in prison, they were suffering and bearing all the insults of the judges and guards.
Just a small question. So this international congress last year, it's not so long ago, you talk about a woman of influence from around the world. So who was participating?
I was at that time in prison, but most probably by the entire world they meant the Islamic countries like I've heard this, that at the time of the protest, women from Algeria were protesting and asking questions. What is the animosity of Iranian women with Islam? Why they are burning their scarves? This makes us sad. And that is something to consider. Is it not the time to stand together and shout, a tourist is an ugly human being, empty thing, stupid thing, unwelcome person who is not allowed to take pleasure in our body, in the female body. Therefore, those who do not earn it must leave it as soon as possible and never return. No matter if you are the sacred assets or the anomalies, a glitch in the system. As a tourist, you cannot and are not allowed to take pleasure in us. Is it not the time to tell all the totalitarian regimes that the physical sight of you does not please? I remember their voice when they told us, you must leave this country and never come back, for you do not deserve the care, protection and respect that we are giving you as women. But I want to tell them that we are not yours to be decided upon.
Yeah, thank you for this very deep thinking, analytic essay. I would just like to summarize a little bit. So you talk about, you make a link between the Islamic Republic, capitalism in a certain way, and industrialization. So these are, I mean, if we think from here about Iran, we have not this image of a capitalistic regime because it's a religious regime. And normally in our way, in our views, religion is also a spiritual aspect. So could it be that this is completely omitted, the spiritual side?
I believe they are using this whenever it is in their benefit. I mean, I don't know if people here have read Brothers Karamazov. There's this very specific chapter 5, the Grand Inquisitor. In there, we are reading about the second coming of Jesus Christ. And although people know that it is him, yet they arrested him. And the Grand Inquisitor, which is a holy man, is talking to Jesus Christ and telling him things that makes you wonder. Because as a religious person, he is well aware of what they are doing, but the thing is that they are using those concepts of God, spirituality, goodness, free will and everything whenever it is in their favor. And when it is not, they are using many rules to impose you, to brainwash you that this is not the case, you should not do this, you should not do that, because it is against God. So they are abusing the concept of God.
So somehow he is the great inquisitor, the leader of the regime. But you were just as if you were reading my thoughts. We have to stop here. Last one, because I was also thinking about Dostoevsky. He says in one of his writings, in every human being there's a spark of God. So where is the spark of God in especially the Iranian men? When I read this, were really also colonialized in a certain way.
Like I said, it is about us and them. I cannot talk about them because to me they are not considered human, because I can never understand how someone can be that much brutal and do all those horrendous things. But about us, men are normal, compassionate, supportive people who are standing by us at every moment of our lives.
Thank you. I think this was a very peaceful end. Thank you very much for listening to us, and thank you especially for Dr. Behnaz Amani for sharing these ideas with us. Thank you very much.
For having me.